does President Trump, does he really have the authority to do everything that he's trying to do? Let's bring in Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio for a closer look on all of this. And Professor Dulio, I mean, this is pretty interesting to see how things are turning out the first 2 weeks that he's in office.
Well, interesting is certainly one way to put it. I think there have been some other monikers and labels applied to it as well, but interesting, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, so let's get to it. I mean, he signed 200, maybe a little bit more executive orders on his first day in office. First, let's talk about what an executive order is and then, what he signed.
Sure. There are executive orders, and we often lump them all together. But in that sort of category of executive orders, there are orders, proclamations, and memoranda, if you can believe it, right? There are three different elements, and they all have their different purposes. Proclamations are generally just very celebratory, sort of rhetorical in nature. Executive orders are the more famous ones. They're not that different from executive memoranda, and I know that sounds like we're really deep in the weeds here, but the differences really do matter. Executive orders and memoranda both stem from the Constitution. Neither of which, however, are mentioned in the Constitution. But what the Constitution does is give the president broad authority as chief executive. It vests the executive power of government with the president. It also includes something called the Take Care Clause, which says that the president shall take care in making sure that the laws of the land are executed. And that's where really the power of executive orders comes from. It is one where the president is directing part of the government, part of the executive branch to do something or not do something.
So he signed a bunch of these, right, on first day in office. But let's talk a little bit about some of the the ones that has people feeling some kind of ways, the ones that most people are concerned about.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Sure. There certainly are controversial ones. I would imagine that at the top of the list for many folks who are concerned, and I mean, if we're honest about it, there are others in the country who are excited to see these executive actions come down because it really demonstrates a shift in policy, right? Or a shift in how the government, at the federal level anyway, is going to do some certain things. So, the most controversial ones, the most attention-getting ones around immigration and probably DEI, and how the federal government's going to handle those kinds of issues moving forward.
So us as the people, if we are opposed to any of his executive orders, is there anything that we can do about that?
Not really. The executive orders carry the weight of law, right? If they stem from either, number one, the president's constitutional duties as laid out in that document, or if they flow from statutory language, a law that was first written and passed by Congress and then signed into law by the president, then that's where the president's power comes in. Now, there are instances where presidents have tried to maybe push the envelope a little bit, and they have been sued, they have been taken to court, and an executive order can be declared unconstitutional. It can be declared null and void. And in fact, we've seen that in the first Trump administration on a number of issues, and we've also seen it in the Biden administration that just ended, most notably when he tried to use an existing law to cancel student loan debt and was rebuffed by the courts all the way up to the Supreme Court saying, no, Mr. President, you can't go that far. So maybe a better answer to your question really is, it depends, right? I mean, is there something you can do? Well, you could sue the president, but then you'd have to go through that entire process. And really, I think viewers really need to know that opponents of President Trump have had their eye on these for a long time, right? They knew what was coming.
And
no, and I was just last thing is that at least 27 court cases, lawsuits have been filed already to push back against early Trump administration actions.
Professor DeLeo, real quick, I just want to ask you one last question. Trump, there's reports circulating today about Trump taking over Gaza, wanting to buy it. What does that entail?
Your guess is as good as mine. I think that a lot of folks were caught off guard in his press conference last night when he mentioned the U.S.'s relationship with Gaza changing in this regard. And obviously there's a ton to sort out. I would also say that it seems to me that in these first couple of weeks of the Trump administration, really what we've seen is he's big on using the leverage that he has or that he thinks he has and trying to negotiate with that leverage. What comes to mind is really the tariff issue and how, threatens tariffs against Mexico and Canada. Of course, those get delayed. And then, find out that some sort of deal, some sort of agreement has been made with those nations that backed the president off of that threat of tariff. So it might be something similar where he is trying to put pressure on one of the parties or the other, frankly.
And one last question. I know that was my last question, but I got one more for you.
Let's have
Trump, he signed an executive order banning transgender athletes from women's sports. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think that is certainly related to Title IX and how that part of the law, the U.S. Code, is going to get executed. If I'm not mistaken, there's already been a lawsuit filed on around that one. And if not, I would imagine, I think even today is Girls and Women's Sports Day, right? That this might be a day where a lawsuit, if it hasn't been filed already, is coming. And this is what I think Americans, they may not like it, but we're going to need to have some patience here and see just how all of this gets sorted out, which it will. It'll take some time. And the courts, where there are disputes, are going to be the last arbiter.
All right, Professor DeLeo, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.